Most people have read some of Grimm's fairy tales during their lives, or at least have seen Disney's adaptation of the most popular stories. However, many readers don't know how terrible and creepy fairy tales can really get. Pages of these classic books are peppered with murder, incest, anthropomorphic sausages, and even dismemberment just for fun. They're enough to make you wonder why fairy tales are even considered okay for children. To be clear, there are some stories here that do have childish themes. They feature silly games, fairies, and even little songs and poems that are sung by birds. But in each one of these stories, some darker theme emerges. Often, these innocent plot points end up seeming all the more morbid. The worst things that happen in fairy tales aren't for those seeking happily ever after. Even the ever-optimistic Cinderella would have run from most of the princes in these stories. So, without further ado, close the blinds, dim those lights, cuddle under your favorite blanket, and let's begin. Number 1. A dead mother returns to nurse her baby. A fairy tale from Russia titled The Dead Mother is equal parts sweet and horrifying. A husband and wife live happily together, awaiting the birth of their baby. When the baby is born, the mother is so happy that she dies. Everyone weeps and mourns, and the man hires an old woman to look after the baby. The child screams and cries all day and refuses to eat. But then, when nightfall comes, the baby is silent. Eventually, people got pretty curious about the baby's habits. The husband, old woman, and some of the townsfolk get together and enter the baby's room. There, they find the baby's dead mother, dressed in her bloody burial clothes, breastfeeding the baby. The dead woman looks at them, then sadly puts the baby to bed and leaves. When the group checks on the baby, they discover that it had died. Never try to separate a mother and her child. Number 2. An old lady is filleted alive. The title of this Italian tale is The Filleted Old Woman, and it certainly delivers on that name. 2 old ugly sisters live together near a king's castle. One day, the king goes for a walk and hears one of the women singing. Her voice is so beautiful that the king assumes she is young and fair, and falls for her instantly. The women, realizing this is a chance for glory, attempts to fool the king into thinking they're young by sucking on their wrinkled fingers and only showing him those. Then they pull back all of their saggy skin and approach him in complete darkness. Still, the king discovers their ruse and throws one of the women from a tower. She gets caught in tree branches below rather than dying, and she hangs there by her saggy skin weeping. Some forest fairies hear her and decide to help her out. They give her fine clothes, servants, anything a rich lady could ask for, and they make her young. The king sees her and decides that even though she was an ugly old liar before, she's pretty and rich now, so he marries her. So, happily ever after, right? Not quite. The other old sister is extremely jealous and decides she wants to be young and beautiful too. She demands her now young sister tell her how she was transformed, The sister becomes so irritated with her questions that she says she filleted herself. The old sister believes the lie and goes to a barber to be filleted. He's dubious, but eventually consents and fillets her alive, as the old woman bleeds out on the floor, skinless. She reminds herself that she must suffer for beauty. Then she dies. Number 3. A children's game with deadly results. There are 2 versions of this German story, and both of them are terrifying. Both start with a pair of children who decide to pretend that one is a butcher and one is a pig. As you might guess, the story is called How Some Children Played at Slaughtering, for a reason. The boy playing the butcher takes the game too seriously and tackles the pig boy and slits open his throat, killing him. This is where the story diverges. In one version, the mother of the 2 children playing sees the killing while bathing her youngest child, rushes down in a fit of rage, and kills the older boy herself. She then goes upstairs to discover that her other child has drowned in the tub. The distraught mother hangs herself, and when her husband comes home to find everyone dead, he dies from grief. The other version is less morbid, but it's arguably more distressing. A councilman witnesses the killing and brings the boy in front of a trial. However, everyone agrees that it was just supposed to be a game, so they can't tell if the boy is evil or not. They decide to test him by setting out some money and a shiny apple. If he chooses the money, he's bad, and if he chooses the apple, he's good. The boy chooses the apple and isn't punished for committing murder. Number 4. A woman chops off her hands to be less beautiful. The Italian tale, Pinta of the Chopped Off Hands, opens with Pinta happily growing up as the sister of the king. Then the king's wife dies, the only woman nearly as beautiful as his own sister. The king decides to marry his sister, but Pinta disagrees. She decides to make herself as ugly as possible by cutting off the part of her the king liked the most, her hands. The king is horrified at what Pinta has done, so he stuffs her into a crate and throws it into the ocean. She's initially helped by a kind fisherman, but his wife still finds her too beautiful, and Pinta is once again tossed into the sea. At last, Pinta's crate washes up on the shores of a wealthy kingdom, and she is taken in by the queen. When the queen dies, her husband remarries Pinta. Pinta gives birth to the king's child while he's away at sea. But the fisherman's jealous wife intercepts the message intended to inform the king that he's a new dad, and changes it to say that Pinta has given birth to puppies. The king decides to accept this twist of fate, but Pinta is banished before he arrives home. Eventually, with the help of a sorcerer, she is reunited with her king and given new hands. The fisherman's wife is dipped in wax and burned to death. Number 5. A man seals himself in a tomb to watch his wife rot. In the Brothers Grimm tale, The Three Snake Leaves, a son of a poor man leaves to find his fortune and takes a job fighting in a war under the king. He rises to prestige during the conflict, and the king takes notice. The king thinks his daughter may be right for the young war hero, but she's a little strange in one aspect. She won't marry a person unless they are willing to be sealed up in a tomb with her dead body. So they could never marry another. Surprisingly, the war hero agrees to this unconventional arrangement, and the two are married. Then his bride becomes sick and dies. As was promised, the young man has himself walled up in the tomb alongside his beloved, with only some bread, wine, candles, and a rotting corpse to keep him company. Then a snake slithers into the tomb. The man kills the snake, hacking it into pieces. But another snake comes out with magical leaves to heal the animal. Seeing the leaves' magic at work, the man takes the leaves and uses them on his dead wife. Lo and behold, she comes back to life. Still, this is not a happy ending. The young wife suddenly finds that she doesn't love her husband anymore. In fact, she's fallen in love with the skipper on a voyaging ship. She and the skipper throw her husband into the ocean, killing him. Luckily, he still has those leaves and comes back to life with the help of a servant. Heartbroken and angry, he hunts down his murderous wife and tells the old king what had happened. Disgusted by his treacherous daughter, the king places her and her lover in a ship full of holes to sink and drown. Number 6. A stepson gets sweet revenge after being beheaded. In the Brothers Grimm story entitled The Juniper Tree, a husband and wife have a lovely little son, and they're very happy until the mother dies. She's buried under a juniper tree, and after some time has passed, the widower remarries and has a daughter. But the stepmother absolutely hates the little boy and abuses him. She tells the little boy to go get an apple from a chest, and when he leans in to grab one, she slams the lid shut, decapitating him. The stepmother tries to put the head back on, but her daughter knocks the head right back off. She pins the whole murder on her daughter and makes the boy's body into stew to feed to her husband. The daughter, who actually liked the boy, buries his bones under the same juniper tree his mother was laid to rest under. But the story doesn't stop there. The boy is reincarnated as a beautiful bird who sings a morbid song about his own murder. The villagers all start giving him gifts in exchange for hearing his song, and he even manages to get a millstone. The bird boy flies to the house, where he gives some gifts to his sister and father, and sings his song until his guilty stepmother is driven to madness. She runs outside, but the bird boy crushes her with the millstone. The boy resumes his original form, and he and his father and sister live happily ever after. Number 7. A Half Hedgehog Boy endures years of suffering. In the Grimm's tale entitled Hans my Hedgehog, a peasant couple has a son who is born with the top half of a hedgehog. They name him Hans my Hedgehog and then ignores the poor boy, who stays behind the stove for years and refuses to die, though they really want him to. One day, in his infinite kindness, Hans' father asks him if he wants a gift. Hans asks for bagpipes and a rooster to ride, and he leaves his parents' house. One day, the king rides by and hears Hans playing his beautiful bagpipe music. The king asks if Hans knows the way back to the palace. Hans tells the lost king that he'll take him there, under the condition that he gets the first thing he sees. Upon their arrival, the king's beautiful daughter runs out to greet her father. The king doesn't want to give his daughter to a hedgehog boy, and he orders his guards to attack Hans. But they can't kill Hans, and he demands to be paid what he's owed. At last, the king gives in, and the princess rides away with Hans. However, Hans stops, rips off her clothes, and sticks her with spines until she is a bloody mess. He tells her that this was for her deceit, and that she must return to her father to live out her days in ugliness. This happens at a second kingdom, but this time the girl agrees to be with Hans. The hedgehog boy tears off his hedgehog skin and has it burned, and is transformed into a handsome prince. He even returns to his parents' house with his new bride to rub it in their faces. Number 8. A woman pretends to be a bird in order to avoid the axe. In the grim fairy tale called Fitcher's Bird, a rich man has made a habit of going around capturing beautiful girls. When he comes across a household with not one, but 3 daughters, he dresses himself as a beggar, gets inside, and steals one of them away with him into the forest. When the rich man reaches home, he gives his new lady everything she's always wanted. He tells her that she can go anywhere she wants, except for that one locked room. The girl eventually gets curious and ventures into the locked room. She finds the walls caked in blood and the floor covered in buckets of body parts from previous wives. There's also a bloody axe and a chopping block, which she figures is meant for her. Horrified, the girl plans to escape before her wedding to the rich man by dressing up as a bird. She dips herself in honey, rolls around in feathers, and puts the skull of one of the former wives in the window, so her groom will think she's still inside. Then she leaves. Arriving wedding guests assume she's a bird, and even her own groom doesn't recognize her. Later, her brothers show up to save their sister and burn down the house with the guests and the groom inside. Number 9. A wife is beaten for asking too many questions. The story, The Language of Beasts, and the Crimson Fairy Book actually starts like a pleasant fairy tale might. A man comes across the magic king of snakes, who grants him the power to talk to beasts. But there's one condition. He can never tell anyone about it, or else he will die. The newfound skill allows the man to speak to his flock of sheep, his dog, and other farm animals. They obey him, and his life becomes a prosperous one. The only problem is that the wife will simply not stop talking to him. She keeps asking over and over what the big secret is. Eventually, he decides he better tell her, because even death is better than listening to her whine. In preparation, he asks for a coffin to be made, and gets settled down into it. His animals begin to mourn him and ask why he's doing this. One rooster calls him an idiot for not keeping his wife in line when even animals can do it. The man agrees with the rooster and gets out of the coffin to deal with his spouse. The story ends with the man laughing and mercilessly beating his wife, telling her that this is the big secret he's been keeping. She never nags him again. The moral of this story is don't nag your husband. I mean, really. Number 10. Rapunzel is an abandoned single mother. You've probably heard the tale of Rapunzel, but you likely don't know the horrific original story. In the old Brothers Grimm version, Rapunzel's mother is having intense pregnancy cravings, so she steals herbs from a witch's garden. The witch responds by demanding the child as recompense. The parents agree, and the witch steals away the infant Rapunzel and locks her in a tower. You know this part. Rapunzel grows into a beautiful young woman with long hair that the witch uses to scale the tower. Then a handsome prince sees her and begins climbing up the tower every night to spend some quality time with Rapunzel. But here's the twist. Rapunzel becomes pregnant. She doesn't understand what's happening to her. She assumes her clothes just don't fit anymore. The witch knows exactly what's going on and sends her out into the desert, where she gives birth, alone and confused, to a set of twins. Meanwhile, back at the tower, the witch waits for the prince, Rapunzel's braid in hand. When the prince climbs up, he is confronted by the witch and leaps from the tower. Unfortunately for him, he lands in thorns and is blinded. The prince wanders the forest, weeping for his lost sight and wretched life. Eventually, the two reunite, and Rapunzel's tears restore the prince's sight. Number 11. All the cute talking animals die. The Brothers Grimm have a story entitled The Death of the Little Hen. And it doesn't pull any punches. The little hen and her rooster Beau are looking for a nut to share together. The hen finds hers first, and rather than sharing, she tries to eat it all herself. But she chokes and begs the rooster to go get her some water. He runs to the well and asks for water, but the well demands some silk. The rooster goes to a fine lady to get silk, but she needs a wreath. He manages to fetch all the items, but by the time he gets back with water, the hen has choked to death. Grief-stricken, the rooster gets some mice to build a cart, and goes to bring the hen's body to a suitable place of burial. On the way, animals begin asking for rides in the cart as well. A fox, a wolf, a bear, an elk, and even a lion all ride along with him, until the cart is packed. They come to a brook, but in trying to cross, the cart capsizes and all the other animals drown. The poor rooster drags the hen's body to the bank, then digs a grave and buries her. He weeps, distraught, and lies on her grave for so long that he dies as well. The story actually ends with the line, "And then everyone was dead." Number 12. Clever Hans isn't really so clever. The tittler Hans, and the brothers Grimm's clever Hans, lives with his mother and is engaged to a girl named Gretel. She likes to give him gifts, but Hans always finds a way to screw things up. Gretel gives him a needle, but he loses it in a haystack. His mother says he should keep needles in his sleeve. Gretel gives Hans a knife, but he keeps it in his sleeve. His mother says he should keep knives in his pocket. Gretel gives him a goat, but he tries to put it in his pocket, where it suffocates, and so on. At last, Gretel gives Hans herself as a gift, all wrapped up, and Hans ties her up and leaves her in the barn. When his mother hears about this, she tells him he's being a moron. He should have cast friendly eyes at her. The incredibly literal Hans goes to the barn, cuts out the eyes of the livestock, and pelts poor, tied-up Gretel with them. Completely through with the numbskull, Gretel frees herself, breaks off the engagement, and leaves. Number 13. A nightingale steals a worm's eyes for a wedding. The Nightingale and the Blind Worm is one of Grimm's tales that attempts to explain an aspect of the natural world. For many years, a nightingale and a worm live in a house together as friends. Both of them only have one eye, but that doesn't seem to bother them much until the nightingale is invited to a wedding. She asks the worm to borrow her eye, and the worm obliges. At the wedding, the nightingale notices that she likes having two eyes, and decides not to return the worm's eye. The worm, upon hearing this, flies into a rage and promises swift revenge upon the nightingale. But the bird just laughed and went to live in a tree. This is why worms have no eyes. Nightingales live in the tallest trees, and worms like to suck out the insides of nightingales' eggs before they can hatch. That's one feud that won't stop anytime soon. Number 14. 3 surgeons make a game of cutting off their own body parts. Surgeons are pretty creepy to some people, and judging from the tenor of the 3 army surgeons, the brothers Grimm weren't fans either. In the story, the 3 traveling surgeons come to an inn. Bragging about their impressive skills, the innkeeper tells them to prove how good they really are. The first surgeon removes his own hand, the second removes his own heart, and the third removes his own eyes, all pledging to reattach the limbs and organs the next day. That night, however, a cat gets into the cabinet the body parts are stored in, because a serving girl leaves it open. Horrified, she and her lover find replacement parts: a hand from a hanged thief, a heart from a pig, and eyes from a cat. The next day, the surgeons reattach the new body parts, unaware that they've been duped, and set out on their way. But then, weird things start happening. The man with a pig's heart starts rooting around in the mud. The man with a cat's eyes can't see right, and the man with a thief's hand keeps trying to steal from people. They realize something is horribly wrong and go back to the inn to collect what's rightfully theirs. But the body parts are gone, and the girl has fled. The surgeons are stuck with those parts for life. Number 15. A pair of sausages have a bizarre dinner together. A brother's grim tale entitled The Strange Feast follows a pair of sausages who are friends. One day, the blood sausage invites the liver sausage over for a nice dinner. She comes to the house, but upon entering, sees some alarming things. There's a monkey with a head wound, fighting cleaning appliances, and more. She asks the blood sausage what's happening, but she doesn't answer. Then, the blood sausage says she has to leave the room. While the liver sausage is alone, she receives a warning. This is a trap. Leave now. As the liver sausage flees, she looks back at the house. There, she sees the blood sausage standing in the attic window with a massive knife. The blood sausage yells, "If I had caught you, I would have had you." Alright, my lovely lilies, thank you so much for watching the new video. If you can, hit that subscribe and like button, comment below and tell me your thoughts. Also, don't forget to tap the little notification bell so you're always in the know on this channel. As well, guys, you can always find me on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, and always you can hit me up in my emails. Feel free to send me your stories, whether they're fiction or totally true. I'm always up for some great stories. And oh, by the way, until next time, sweet dreams.